The baby elephant burst through the tall grass as if the earth beneath him had turned into fire. His small feet pounded the dry soil in uneven, frantic steps, sending dust swirling around him in trembling spirals. There was no gentle introduction to his fear, no soft transition into the nightmare unraveling before him. Everything happened too fast. One moment he had been nudging his mother for the comfort of her familiar rumbling call. The next, the forest seemed to swallow her whole. Vines, thick, ancient, and knotted like the roots of forgotten trees, had dragged her down when part of the hillside collapsed. Now she lay trapped, unable to rise, her massive body pinned by coils that tightened with every desperate movement. Her breath came out in heavy bursts that shook the ground beneath the calf's trembling legs. He pressed himself against her side, his tiny trunk sliding frantically across her face, as though searching for a solution hidden beneath her skin. Her eyes, filled with pain but still burning with maternal strength, met his. She released a soft rumble meant to calm him, yet even that sound wavered with exhaustion. When he tried to push against the vines, his efforts barely made them shift. They seemed alive, like serpents of vegetation clinging with cruel purpose. The calf backed away, panic rising in his chest until it spilled out of him in a shrill trumpet that echoed through the forest like a plea flung into the sky. He didn't understand why this was happening. He didn't understand why the forest, which had always felt like a warm, breathing sanctuary when his mother guided him, had suddenly become a cage of shadows and merciless entanglements. Something inside him shattered at the sight of her helplessness. An instinct, deep, ancient, older than memory, pushed him to run. Not away, but toward something, toward hope, toward help. He sprinted through the vegetation with no clear path in mind, leaves slapping against his sides, branches cracking under the urgency of his movement. The forest loomed around him like a labyrinth. Towering trunks twisted into shapes that resembled watchful silhouettes, and the air hung heavy with humidity and the scent of earth tearing under pressure. The calf stumbled once, nearly falling, but caught himself and pushed forward again, his small heart thundering with a force far too large for his fragile body. He passed a small stream where he and his mother had often splashed during hot afternoons. The memory cut into him sharply, contrasting the comfort of then with the terror of now. He paused only long enough to lift his trunk and release another trembling call. Its echo drifted across the landscape, dissolving into distant silence. He didn't know if anyone would hear him. He didn't know if anyone could. Still, he pushed onward. The sky above thickened with drifting clouds, dimming the light that filtered through the canopy. The calf's shadow stretched and twisted as he moved, merging with darker shades cast by trees whose roots curled like warning fingers. Every sound in the distance felt amplified, the flutter of wings, the rustle of tall grasses, the distant groan of shifting branches. Yet none of these sounds were familiar enough to offer comfort. None belonged to the herd he desperately hoped to find. He reached a shallow valley where the earth dipped and widened into a natural meeting ground used by elephants over generations. Trails carved by countless heavy footsteps branched off in every direction. Here memories lingered, his mother's gentle nudges encouraging him to cross the valley, the vibrations of her steady footsteps guiding him to safety. He felt the absence of those vibrations now like the absence of breath. His legs shook, but he stood tall enough to raise his trunk and release the loudest trumpet he could summon, one that tore from his chest with all the fear, hope, and desperation he carried. And now, as the wind carried his cry across the open land, I want to ask you who are watching this moment unfold. From where are you witnessing this little elephant's plea? Share it in the comments so we know where his story has reached, how far his courage has traveled. The echo drifted, and then something changed. A low tremor moved beneath the soil. At first it felt like a memory, like the ghost of his mother's footsteps returning to him. But then the tremor grew stronger, more rhythmic, more alive. The calf lifted his head, his ears widened with anticipation, his eyes searching the horizon. And then, emerging from the distant haze, like ancient guardians sculpted from the earth itself, came a herd. They moved with a unified grace, each massive form swaying with weight and wisdom. At their front walked the matriarch, towering yet gentle, her tusks curving like ivory crescents shaped by time. She stopped several paces away from the trembling calf, lowering her head to study him. Her eyes reflected not just concern, but recognition. Recognition of suffering, of urgency, of the universal language elephants share beyond words. The calf stepped toward her, his small frame sagging with exhaustion. He pressed his forehead against her trunk when she reached out to him, offering a soft rumble that flowed through him like warmth after a cold night. The matriarch understood. She did not need explanations. His fear was enough. His scent was enough. His trembling was enough. She turned to the herd, issuing low-frequency calls that rippled through their bodies like silent commands from an ancient code passed through generations of survivors. Without hesitation, they surrounded the calf, not trapping him, but embracing him with presence, with unity, with the unspoken promise that he was no longer alone. He began to lead them, pausing every few steps to make sure they followed. They always did. Their footsteps formed a symphony of determination behind him, their shadows stretching alongside his like guardians carved from the sun. The journey back to the clearing felt longer than the path he had taken alone, but now every sound carried reassurance. The synchronized thuds of heavy feet, the distant huffs exchanged between herd members, the steady rhythm of beings who understood that no mother should suffer alone and no child should carry despair by himself. When they finally reached the clearing, the air seemed to still. The mother elephant lay where he had left her, struggling against the vines that refused to loosen. Sweat darkened her skin. She lifted her head weakly when she heard the herd approach, her eyes widening when she saw her calf standing beside the matriarch. Relief flickered across her expression, like a fading flame catching new air. The matriarch approached her slowly, respectfully. She examined the vines, testing their tightness with deliberate touches. The herd moved around them, forming a protective barrier in case predators sensed weakness. The calf pressed against his mother again, but this time he wasn't trembling from fear. He was trembling from hope. And if this moment is already moving you, please consider subscribing to the channel so stories like this can continue reaching those who need them. This is a fictional story created by artificial intelligence, designed to inspire empathy, compassion, and the desire to protect wildlife and the world we share. The matriarch stood over the trapped mother like a silent pillar carved from wisdom itself, her presence radiating steadiness as the forest held its breath around them. The vines gripping the mother elephant were not ordinary strands of vegetation. They were strands of an ancient plant that thrived in the shadows of landslides and broken earth. A creeping tangle strengthened each season by the sun and rain. Wrapped around her chest, legs and belly, they dug into the folds of her skin with a cruel tightness that made every breath a test of endurance. She trumpeted again, weaker this time, a sound strained at the edges, as if each second pulled her further into exhaustion. The calf pressed his face against her cheek, releasing a soft rumble that quivered with fear. But now, for the first time since the ordeal began, the air carried something besides despair. It carried purpose. It carried unity. The matriarch stepped back, signaling the herd with a low vibration that passed through the ground like a ripple. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the vines, analyzing the angles, the tension, the points where they had fused with the debris. Elephants are architects of patience. They do not rush when life is at stake. And so they stood, forming a quiet circle around the mother, taking in every detail of the trap that held her. The forest wind stirred the dust at their feet, whispering through the grass as if urging them to act. The matriarch extended her trunk, brushing the vines with careful pressure. The first attempt to pull achieved nothing. The vines merely shifted, tightening slightly, causing the mother to let out a rumble of discomfort that struck the calf like a spark of panic. He moved forward instinctively, his tiny trunk wrapping around hers, offering comfort the only way he knew how. The matriarch lowered her head toward him again, rumbling softly to calm his trembling body. Then she signaled the others. Two large females approached, their steps slow, deliberate. They positioned themselves along the mother's side, studying the vines with the same meticulous attention the matriarch had shown. Their trunks moved like skilled hands, feeling for weaknesses. Elephants do not speak in words, but their communication ran deeper, through vibration, breath, memory, and what passed between them now was a silent agreement. They would free her, no matter the cost or time. The first attempt was gentle. They pulled from multiple angles with synchronized force, trying to loosen the central coils. The vines resisted, hardened by age and the weight of the fallen soil. Bits of bark and dust crumbled, falling across the mother's side. Her breath hitched. The calf let out a distressed bleat and attempted to wedge himself between the rescuers, but the matriarch blocked him with her huge leg, protecting him from getting crushed beneath their movements. The forest watched quietly. Even the birds held themselves still in the branches. It felt as though the entire world balanced on the fragile space between success and failure. The matriarch signaled again. This time the herd changed strategy. They moved larger pieces of debris, broken branches, slabs of earth, clumps of vegetation that had collapsed over the area when the hillside gave way. Each movement was slow but powerful, carried out with a coordination that seemed almost ceremonial. The vibrations of their footsteps formed a steady rhythm that soothed the calf in waves he didn't fully understand. He watched as they cleared space around his mother, creating room to maneuver, to pull, to breathe. With every scrap of material removed, the air grew lighter. The earth beneath seemed to shift, as if possibilities themselves were being unearthed. But the vines still held firm. The matriarch approached the thickest coil, the one crossing the mother's torso like a cruel rope. She wrapped her trunk around it and braced herself, planting her feet into the ground with the weight of generations. Another elder approached from the other side. Slowly, with a deep, vibrating rumble, they pulled. The vines stretched, just barely. The mother groaned. The calf cried out. The vine did not break. The failure resonated through the clearing like a cold breath. The calf turned in frantic circles, unable to contain his anxiety. He pressed himself against his mother, then against the matriarch, as though begging someone, anyone, to do something more. His tiny form shook so violently that one of the younger females lowered her trunk to caress his back, guiding him into the circle of protection again. The matriarch, however, did not move with despair. She stood still for a long moment, breathing deeply, almost as though listening to the forest. Then she stepped away from the vines and lifted her trunk high. She released a long, resonant call that traveled far beyond the clearing, deeper into the plains, summoning something unseen but known to all who understood their ancient ways. Her call was not for more elephants. It was for strength, from the land, from memory, from unity itself. The herd responded. They repositioned, each finding space around the mother, forming a powerful ring of intention. They touched one another with trunks, creating a chain of grounding and focus, their breaths synchronized, their bodies stilled. For a moment, everything felt suspended in a sacred pause, as if the spirits of the earth had gathered to witness what would come next. Then the matriarch moved. With a rumble that vibrated through the calf's bones, she signaled the herd. 4 females stepped forward, not 2, 4. They wrapped their trunks around different sections of the vine network, gripping with a strength tempered by precision. The calf watched them, his breath catching in hopeful silence. The forest exhaled. Together, the rescuers leaned back, anchoring themselves with monumental power. Muscles rippled beneath their thick skin, tusks angled for balance. Their feet dug into the ground as soil scattered around them. The vines strained, groaning like wooden beams under pressure. Still they pulled. Still they resisted failure. And then, a sound like a crack echoed through the clearing. Not the crack of breaking bone or falling branches, but the dry snap of something ancient losing its grip. The first vine loosened, unwinding just enough for one of the females to yank a few inches of freedom into existence. The mother gasped, lifting her head higher than she had since the ordeal began. Another vine stretched, another groan, another crack. The rescue had shifted from possibility to inevitability. The calf chirped with renewed hope, running back to his mother's side as the herd continued working, their determination unbroken. Every freed vine offered new angles, new opportunities. The matriarch oversaw every movement, stepping in when needed, rumbling directions when a female grew fatigued, or when a vine required a different approach. Piece by piece, they dismantled the trap. Piece by piece, they brought life back into the mother's fading hope. Dust clung to their skin, sweat darkened their foreheads. Yet still they worked, because elephants understand something humans often forget, that saving one life strengthens the entire world. And if the strength of this herd, the courage of this calf, and the resolve of this moment move you in any way, let their spirit reach even further. Consider subscribing to the channel so that stories like this one continue to bring light, compassion, and unity wherever they are heard. The calf pressed himself against his mother again as another vine loosened. Her trunk brushed his cheek weakly, but this time she wasn't comforting him out of fear. She was acknowledging hope. Real hope. The herd wasn't done, but they were no longer fighting against impossibility. They were carving a path toward triumph. The clearing had transformed into a battleground of determination, where every breath of wind seemed to carry fragments of struggle and hope intertwined. The mother elephant, though weak and immobilized, lifted her head slightly as the herd worked around her with unwavering persistence. Bits of broken vines lay scattered across the soil, like remnants of a long, painful imprisonment. Yet the toughest strands still clung to her body, looping around her legs and hips in a stubborn lattice that seemed almost fused to her skin. The calf stayed pressed against her side, his small trunk stroking her gently, as if whispering promises only a child could believe without doubt. His presence kept her anchored, reminding her that she wasn't drifting toward darkness alone. She still had something worth fighting for. The matriarch circled the trapped mother with the focus of a seasoned leader who had endured droughts, storms, loss, and triumph. Her ancient eyes scanned the remaining vines, examining their angles the way a sculptor examines stone before the final strike. She rumbled deeply, summoning two of the strongest females from the herd, who stepped forward with deliberate purpose. Dust lifted under their massive feet, swirling in slow spirals as though even the earth recognized the gravity of their task. One of the rescuing females lowered her head to study a particularly thick vine wrapped tightly around the mother's back legs. She pressed her trunk against it, feeling not just the tension, but the life of the plant itself, the density, the hardened age, the stubborn grip born of seasons layered upon seasons. The mother elephant twitched under the pressure, releasing a strained breath that trembled through her entire body. The calf let out a shrill protest, but the matriarch nudged him gently aside, grounding him with a low vibration that hummed through the soil. She wanted him to watch, to witness, to understand that courage is not loud, it is persistent. Slowly, the herd began phase 2 of their rescue, uniting technique with brute strength. Two females gripped the central vine with their trunks, pulling in opposite directions to test the plant's limits. The vine elongated slightly, then snapped back with an aggressive recoil that startled a flock of birds from the surrounding trees. Leaves fluttered to the ground as shadows danced across the clearing. The calf darted closer to his mother, his tiny body trembling as the tension in the air thickened. The matriarch stepped forward, letting out a controlled rumble that steadied the others. She understood that vines like these did not yield to erratic pulling. They required strategy, coordination, and unwavering patience. She motioned with her head, slow, graceful, authoritative, and the herd repositioned. Two elephants braced themselves behind the mother, using their weight to stabilize her so she wouldn't be dragged or injured when the vines finally gave way. Another female stood near the calf, keeping him from wandering into the danger zone. The calf, though restless, obeyed her gentle guidance, pushing himself against her leg for comfort. She responded with a soft exhale, the kind that elephants reserve for their young. Then the pulling began again. This time the movements were synchronized. 4 trunks wrapped around the vines at carefully chosen points. Muscles bunched beneath thick, wrinkled skin as the rescuers leaned back, anchoring themselves with deep-rooted strength. Soil shifted beneath them, forming shallow grooves as they slid a few inches, adjusting their footing. The vines stretched once more, longer now, as though the herd's persistence had awakened old fibers that had forgotten they were capable of yielding. A crack echoed, a small one. The kind barely audible unless one was listening with hope sharpened into instinct. The calf froze, his ears lifted, his eyes widened. The mother released a breath that shuddered through her chest, relief mingling with pain. The rescuers did not pause. They pulled harder, their breaths deepening in unison. Each movement seemed guided by something older than memory. A rhythm passed through generations of elephants who had relied on one another to withstand the unforgiving wild. Another crack, and then a shift. The thickest vine loosened, unwinding from the mother's legs with the slow reluctance of something that had long forgotten how to let go. Dust erupted into the air as it finally peeled away, dropping onto the ground with a heavy thud. The calf trumpeted joyfully, circling his mother in quick, excited steps. His relief poured out of him uncontrollably, like a storm breaking after days of suffocating heat. But the rescue was far from over. Holding her leg freed allowed new angles for the herd to work with. The matriarch moved again, analyzing the vines wrapped around the mother's torso. These vines had slipped into the creases of her skin, embedding themselves so deeply that removing them required precision softened by compassion. The matriarch extended her trunk and touched the mother's cheek, grounding her in the moment, reminding her that she was not alone. Not now, not ever. Another pair of elephants stepped forward, focusing on the network of vines across her midsection. They examined them inch by inch, careful not to cause unnecessary pain. The sun filtered through the canopy above, casting golden fragments across their backs, illuminating their dust-covered skin like war paint. The clearing felt sacred again, transformed not by suffering now, but by the unspoken vow of a herd that refused to abandon one of their own. They pulled again. Slow, deliberate, powerful. The vines resisted at first, tightening their grip as though fighting back. The mother groaned, her body tensing. The calf rushed forward, but the young female protector blocked him gently, offering a soothing hum. He leaned into her, shaking, watching the struggle unfold with eyes too young to accept the concept of helplessness. Then something shifted in the rhythm of the rescue. The herd's efforts grew stronger, not because their muscles suddenly gained new power, but because their unity deepened. Their breathing aligned, their bodies moved with perfect synchronization. Their rumbles harmonized into a low, resonant vibration that filled the air like a chant. Even the forest seemed to respond. The branches swayed, leaves rustled, the wind changed direction, as though drawn toward the pulsing determination radiating from the elephants. And then the vines snapped. Not one, not two, but several strands all at once. They burst apart with a thunderous crack that echoed across the clearing like distant lightning. The mother's body jolted, but the elephants behind her stabilized her quickly. Bits of vegetation flew through the air, landing far beyond the rescue site. She was not fully free, but the final stage had begun. The calf ran to her, his trunk swirling around hers with frantic affection. She touched him gently, her strength returning in small, hopeful pulses. The herd allowed them this moment, brief but profound, before resuming their work. They gathered for the last set of vines, the ones binding her lower belly and hips. These vines were the toughest, buried beneath the weight of her body. The matriarch approached them with a steady gaze, understanding the delicacy required. The herd once again formed their stabilizing formation. The calf stepped aside this time on his own, watching with awe growing beneath his fear. Perhaps he sensed what was coming. The matriarch lifted her trunk, signaling the final pull. The air thickened, The wind quieted. Every muscle in every rescuer tightened. And then they pulled. Slow at first, then with increasing force, leaning back with the steady persistence of mountains learning to move. The vines stretched, groaned, cracked, and finally, they snapped apart in a violent release that sent shockwaves through the soil. The mother elephant collapsed forward onto her knees, then steadied herself, breathing heavily as dust rose around her in a shimmering veil. The calf rushed to her, his entire body vibrating with joy and overwhelming relief. She wrapped her trunk around him, not with weakness, but with life. She was free. The herd rumbled in triumph. The earth itself seemed to echo their celebration. And if this emotional rescue touched your heart, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the continuation of powerful stories like this. Stories that remind us of unity, strength, and compassion in the natural world. The moment the last vine snapped, the clearing fell into a silence so complete it felt sacred. Dust floated slowly through the air like drifting embers from a dying fire, catching the sunlight in soft, golden shimmers. The mother elephant remained motionless for several breaths, adjusting to the sudden weightlessness of freedom. Her chest rose and fell in deep, trembling waves, each inhale a victory earned not by chance but by love, unity, and relentless perseverance. Her calf pressed against her immediately, his tiny trunk curling around hers with a desperation that cracked open the heart of the entire herd. For the first time since the ordeal began, her rumble carried strength. Weak, yes, but steady, alive, present. The sound vibrated through the ground like a message whispered to the earth itself. I am still here. The matriarch stepped closer, her presence dignified, calm, and ancient. She lowered her head respectfully toward the rescued mother, acknowledging a warrior who had survived a trial few could endure. Their trunks brushed, a quiet exchange of gratitude, reassurance, and memory in the language only elephants fully understand. The herd gathered around them, forming a protective circle, not out of fear anymore, but out of reverence. They had witnessed suffering. They had fought it. And now together, they would witness healing. The mother tried to rise. Her first attempt failed, her legs trembling violently beneath her. The calf released a shrill cry, circling her in anxious loops. The young female assigned to guard him guided him gently back with her trunk, allowing the mother space while keeping him close enough to feel her presence. The mother tried again, this time shifting her weight forward, planting her front feet into the loosened soil. Her breath came out in a burst of determination. The herd leaned in, not touching, but ready, offering their silent support through the vibrations humming beneath the ground. Slowly, painfully, she lifted herself. Her legs wobbled, her body swayed. The vines had left grooves across her skin, dark, bruised impressions that marked the struggle as clearly as scars. But she stood. Even if unsteady, even if weak, she stood. A wave of low rumbles swept through the herd, echoing like a chorus carried by the earth itself. The calf rushed forward, pressing himself against her front leg. She lowered her head to him, enveloping him in the curve of her trunk with a tenderness unbroken by pain. The bond between them radiated through the clearing, pure, instinctual, unshakable. But the matriarch, ever vigilant, stepped forward once more to assess the mother closely. She traced the lingering vine marks, the areas where skin had been pinched raw, the subtle trembling still coursing through her legs. Healing would take time, strength would take patience, but she was alive. And in the world of elephants, that meant hope could fully bloom again. The herd sensed this shift in energy. Several females approached, brushing their trunks along the mother's back and shoulders, reaffirming her place among them, reminding her she was not returning to the journey alone. Elephants heal as families. Their memories stretch far across years, binding them in ways deeper than survival. And this moment, this triumph, would be stored in their collective history as a reminder that unity could overcome even nature's harshest trials. The matriarch gave a final rumble of approval. It was time to move. The herd adjusted their formation carefully, making space for the weakened mother and her calf at the center, where the safest members of a herd always walk. The calf stayed so close to her side she could feel the warmth of his body brushing against hers with each step. His eyes remained wide, not with fear anymore, but with awe. He had watched them fight for her. He had watched them free her, and now he watched her walk again, step by determined step, even though the ground still trembled beneath her unstable legs. The first few meters were slow. The mother's steps dragged. Soil shifted beneath her weight. Occasionally she paused, breathing heavily, gathering strength before continuing. The calf matched her pace perfectly, as though afraid that if he moved even a fraction too fast, he might break the fragile miracle unfolding before him. Every time she slowed, he slowed. Every time she lifted her foot, he mirrored her movement with childlike devotion. The herd moved around them like a living fortress. The matriarch walked slightly ahead, scanning the path for hazards. 2 strong females flanked the mother, ready to catch her should she stumble. The younger elephants stayed behind, keeping predators away with their sheer presence. Even the bulls trailing at the far end of the herd seemed more alert than usual. No one would take advantage of weakness here, not today. As they reached the edge of the clearing, the forest opened into a wide expanse of sunlit savanna. The golden grasses swayed in gentle waves, welcoming them back into the world beyond survival. The mother lifted her head, smelling the wind as though tasting freedom again for the first time. The scent of distant watering holes drifted through the air, mixed with the warmth of earth and the promise of rest. With a trembling rumble, she nudged her calf forward. He chirped, bounding ahead a few playful steps before returning to her side. Even after everything, innocence found a way to grow again. The matriarch observed this with a softened gaze. In elephants, joy is not taken lightly. It is a victory, a declaration, a reclaiming. The herd continued toward the plains, moving slowly to match the mother's pace. Each step she took became steadier, each breath deeper. The pain remained, but it no longer overshadowed her will. The vines had left marks on her skin, but the herd had left marks on her heart, marks carved in unity, sacrifice, and love. As they neared a shaded grove where the land dipped gently into a cool patch of earth, the matriarch paused. She turned back toward the path behind them, the clearing where the battle had taken place, now silent, still, and unremarkable once more. But she remembered. The herd remembered. And perhaps the land itself remembered too. She rumbled deeply, a sound of closure, a sound of triumph, a sound of gratitude. The mother eased herself onto the soft ground beneath the shade, lowering her weight carefully until she rested comfortably. The calf curled beside her immediately, pressing into the warmth of her chest as she draped her trunk protectively over him. Her eyes closed, not in defeat but in relief, the kind that washes over the soul after surviving what once seemed impossible. The herd formed a loose circle around them, settling into the calm of the afternoon. Dust settled. The wind softened. Peace returned, as naturally as the sun lowering toward the horizon. And as the mother breathed steadily beside her calf, safe under the watchful eyes of her family, the world felt whole again. If this emotional journey touched your heart, let it continue beyond this moment. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments so stories of unity, courage, and compassion can keep spreading across the world, reaching hearts just like yours, wherever you may be.